Good morning, good morning, good morning from Twin Oaks Family Farm in rural Southeast Ohio, USA. Thanks for joining us on our YouTube channel, Twin Oaks Farm Poultry. I am Melissa, and we are in the meat bird production barn with a flock of 124 Cornish rock cross meat chickens that are 15 days old. And it's chow time. We're feeding the birds, and we're going to feed our brains with some information specifically about what's important to Cornish rock cross meat chickens. So going to approach this in two ways. First of all, want to tell you, why do we talk about meat birds so specifically as if they're different from all the rest of the chickens, like the chickens that we use for egg production breeds? So going to address that, and going to address what Cornish rock cross meat chickens prioritize. So if you are raising Cornish rock cross meat chickens, even if you're raising maybe 12 to 25 at a time, even in a different setting than we are, ours are in a confined system inside a barn, maybe yours are in a chicken tractor, part of the production, maybe you're raising them for household consumption, whereas we're raising them for sales to clients in our local area who want real good chicken and want to know it was raised with good livestock management practices. Even if we are raising them for two different purposes, if you're raising Cornish rock cross meat chickens, this is a great video for you to watch, because regardless of the size of our flocks, regardless of the goals with if we're going to put it in the household freezers or put it in other people's freezers, Cornish rock cross meat chickens still prioritize the same basic needs in the same way. And we can take good management practices, if they're sound and solid practices in general, we can scale them up or scale them down, and they're going to work for the birds. And that's the priority. No matter what, if we're raising them to eat at our own tables or if we're raising them for someone else to enjoy at their tables, the number one priority for us as flock managers has got to be quality outcome. Quality outcome. Nothing else matters. And even in our operation where we're raising them with the goal of having that end product of great poultry so that consumers in our area can experience great poultry right at their tables and trust that they were raised with practices that give the birds excellent quality of life. Even with that being the case, we have diversifications in our farm, in our small farm, our small poultry operation, to help us be able to afford to raise the meat chickens, because a lot of the expenses, even though we're going to recoup that in an income stream, a lot of the expenses we have to front them up front. So we do other things, including the YouTube channel, and we don't get anything. We don't get any money from the YouTube channel. We don't get any real benefit of any tangibles from it, but it helps us spread awareness of good agriculture practices and why agriculture is important, and the dual fact that agriculture needs consumers and consumers need agriculture. So we utilize the social media. But even with all those things going on, we have to remember the top priority in the operation has to be the quality outcome of the end product, the poultry we're producing. And in order to get a quality outcome in the end product in your poultry, you've got to use good, solid livestock management practices in the poultry pen with your birds. And with Cornish rock cross meat chickens, they have pretty specific preferences, and that's what this video is about. So there was your lead in. We're getting right to it. Going to turn the camera around, look at the birds again, and we're actually middle of choring. So in the middle of tending to what the birds need right now. So they are, as I said, 15 days old. Thanks for joining me, y'all. 15 days old. There's 124 of them. We're doing a morning set of chores. So basically, chores generally involves, first of all, an observation of the flock at large and the individuals in the flock, trying to get a sense of their wellness and how they're doing. And we go from there to assessing what is in the waters, how much water have they consumed since the last time we made sure those were filled and topped off. And we assess feed, how much feed have they eaten down since the last time we provided feed, how much feed do we need to add with the waters and the feeders, and the age that these birds are at, assessing do we need to be adjusting the kinds of waters and kinds of feeders. You can see here we have the little tiny trays. We call those baby bird feeders. And we have the big feeders, okay? And so then we also are assessing the ambient conditions in the pen, which include basically lighting, temperature, and floor quality. So when we're doing chores, all of that is going on. And as I said, we're kind of mid-chores because I've made sure that they have full water in the area of the pen they're prioritizing. I've started filling feeders and assessing where our feed consumption rate is currently, and assessing what we can do about adjusting feeders from the baby tray feeders to the big bird feeders. And so while all this is going on, I'm paying attention to where the birds are in the pen, how they're spreading out their stocking density in the pen. And stocking density is just how many birds and how much space. We don't like our birds to be crowded. We don't want meat production animals to be burning off excessive energy, but we really value making sure that they have a lot of room to spread out, to move around, to not get trapped somewhere. So we tend to give our birds more room rather than less room. So we're assessing, though, as I said, where are those birds staying in the pen, and that's telling us where they're comfortable. So that's part of assessing how they're interacting with the ambient temperature and the ambient lighting and the floor quality. So that's giving you a background on where we're at in chores. And so like when I finish recording, I'm going to complete chores. So at the end of the video, when we wrap up, I'll tell you what I'll be doing to complete chores. But I said we're going to look at what's important to Cornish rock cross meat chickens from two angles. First of all, why do we talk about them like they're separate and different from egg production chickens? So let's talk about that a moment. Why do we get so specific about the details of what Cornish rock cross meat chickens want? Why do we talk about them like they're a whole different animal from egg chickens? Because in one sense, the nature of this beast is a meat chicken that is the outcome when it hatches out of the egg. The genetic package of these chickens is the outcome of just selective breeding. This didn't happen in a lab. It didn't happen in a petri dish. It didn't happen in a 3D printer. There's nothing crazy Frankenstein lab engineered about their genes or their cells, okay? This is the result of highly specialized selective breeding over lots and lots and lots of generations. So we're talking like thousands of birds in the whole process, really, okay? Very, very specialized. So specialized that it's almost, to get this modern Cornish rock cross meat chicken is almost exclusive to getting your chicks through reputable large hatcheries. So Cornish rock cross meat chickens, as they hatch out of the egg, are the result of selective breeding. So basically, in breeding programs, the birds that can sustain rapid growth, convert feed to meat efficiently, and distribute the meat to the chicken breast, drumsticks, and thighs well, the birds that can combine those three qualities are the outcome that we want in the Cornish rock cross meat chicken. So the parent birds that can contribute those qualities are the birds that basically go into the selective breeding, right? So that has made meat chickens significantly different from raising egg production chickens. Namely, that if you feed these birds with a start to finish meat bird finish on a prescribed schedule, which is basically let them have feed all the time, then these birds are capable of being finished, what we call finished, ready for meat production, ready for processing into poultry in 5 or 6 weeks. Really, really ready. If you want to raise them longer, you really got to pay attention to the feed regimen, and you probably have to change that from the way like our operation feeds them, because we are feeding with their genetics in mind and with recognition that they can finish for poultry in about 5 weeks and intending to finish them for poultry in about 5 weeks. So we put the feed to them. And we try to keep the ambient conditions as close to their preferences as possible, okay? So that is why we do sort of specialize a management system for the meat birds that is significantly different than a management system we would use for the egg chickens. Like with egg chickens, you know, we would probably feed them the 22% protein feed for maybe the first month, if that long. And then we would drop them down, no hesitation, to a 19% protein. You could do that with meat birds as well, but that might prolong their finish. We keep ours generally on a 22% throughout production, start, grow, and finish until processing. So, you know, that's just one example of a difference of how we would manage egg production birds compared to meat production birds. But with these meat production birds, they really are, when you get the Cornish cross meat chickens, they really are significantly different, even from heritage breeds of egg chickens. And that does need to be taken into consideration in your management practices, in your management system, okay? So that addresses that question. And so then the other angle we were going to look at this question from is, what do they prioritize? So this is really the guts of what we want to get to in this video, because part of what we're doing in morning chores is deciding what is the ambient temperature situation and what is the ambient lighting situation. So combination of research and experience, we have figured out that when we move chicks in, and we go by Fahrenheit temperature system, Fahrenheit degrees. So we figured out when we move chicks in, we know that ambient conditions around about 90 degrees Fahrenheit is a good temperature point for them. We need it warm, okay? So when we first move them in and we're working around their brooding space, we as people should feel quite warm, should feel like a hot summer day to us down where the birds are living, at the level the birds are living. Okay, so we know if it does, and if they're acting comfortable and staying in that area, then we've probably got the temperature right, okay? So then the second thing we've learned, combination of research and experience, is as these birds grow, you can pretty much plan on their temperature preference and need decreasing about 5 degrees Fahrenheit weekly until you get down to about 70 degrees Fahrenheit, and then it's going to stay there. And if you keep the birds in production past when you reach that 70 degree Fahrenheit threshold, then they still never really want it cooler than about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, and they don't want it any warmer than they want it. So when we get out to, you know, like 4 weeks, around 28 days, we're saying we want a temperature of approximately 70 degrees Fahrenheit around these birds as much of the time as we possibly can have, because that's what they want, and we don't want it any warmer at that point because they don't tolerate heat well. As hatchlings, they don't tolerate cold well at all. And it's not going to kill them fast, it's going to kill them slow, because it creates a metabolic reaction that weakens the heart, leads to heart stress that we see catch up like at week 4 and week 5 in mortality in the chickens because of heart failure that initiated back when they got cold in the beginning. So that's always a concern if your chicks get cold in the beginning. So hatchlings don't tolerate cold. Likewise, nearly finished meat birds do not tolerate heat well. So that's what this barn is actually set up for, is for nearly finished meat birds to help them tolerate heat. Because we're in rural Southeast Ohio, USA, we prefer to raise our birds in the warmer months of the year so that we get a good start and don't have to worry about chill stress, but then that subjects our nearly finished birds to hot temperatures. So we actually have doorways. We're just going to make a spin around the barn. Doorways on all 4 sides here. This side can actually open up completely almost, and that side has a kind of a little, like a hall almost, between 2 sheds that are attached there. But we can open all of those up and have such great air exchange and air movement in here, we can mitigate a lot of the consequences from heat when we have nearly finished birds. But we still have to supplement them for some warmth when they're growing, especially like this time of year. It's May 6th, 2024. We're dealing with birds that are just about 2 weeks old. They really want it to be about 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Outdoor temperature for us right now is about 65 degrees Fahrenheit, may get up to 70 degrees Fahrenheit. So basically what that tells me as a producer is I'm probably going to have supplemental heat lamps on this flock all day long, because we're not going to reach 80 degrees Fahrenheit. 70 degrees Fahrenheit, we can evaluate them. We might be able to turn the heat lamps off, but in general, I know I'm probably going to have to leave them on. So that's the crux of the question: what do Cornish rock cross meat chickens prioritize? They prioritize ambient temperature. Ambient temperature. So I've just really given you the lowdown on the top priority to Cornish rock cross meat chickens. They prioritize ambient temperature. We've just discussed the temperatures they want to be at the ages and stages of production. And the closer we can get ambient temperature to their preferences and needs, the better the flock's going to thrive, and the better the flock's going to finish, and the better outcome we're going to have. We're back to that most important goal for the producer, the finished product, the outcome on the whole chickens or the cuts of poultry that we get from raising the flock for production agriculture, okay? So that's what chicks prioritize. So you can see what we have here. Since we know outside ambient temperature is basically going to be what our inside ambient temperature is in our barn, because it's a rustic barn, so it basically matches outdoor temperature. Since we know that it's going to sometimes be cool for them, we know we have to set up supplemental warmth. So we set up a footprint of supplemental warmth, which we're not using all the lamps. We can use part of the row or all the row, and we can use both rows or just one row. But we set up an aisle of supplemental warmth, and we work to put water in that aisle of supplemental warmth, and we work to put food either right at the edge of it or near it, okay? So in this case, the food is close enough the birds are going to go to it. When they were younger, we had the food in even closer to the ambient warmth, but we know now they're going to go to it. As far as ambient lighting, we do keep a light on overhead in our barn most of the time. Unless it's super bright outdoors and we have all the doors open, we can actually turn the overhead light off during the day and it's still very bright in here. Now naturally, if you're using supplemental lamps for warmth, for ambient temperature, that is going to impact your ambient lighting as well, because when that's targeting a beam of warmth, it's also targeting a beam of light. So that's going to create a lighting circumstance, that's going to impact your bird's activity and your bird's preferences. So that's part of that. We never turn the overhead light off like at night in an effort. What I'm trying to say is, sorry, I got tongue tied there. We never make an effort to make it completely dark generally in here, because most of the time they need the supplemental heat lamp, so there's always some kind of ambient light. And also from a production standpoint with meat birds, as you shorten production length, you need to leave the lights on to keep them going to the feed. So what you'll find is, y'all that have raised chickens, your egg production chickens are the same in this respect. When it's dark, chickens don't move because they can't see, and that has to do with the rods and the cones in their eyes. One is a photoreceptor for color, one is a photoreceptor for light. They don't have very many of the one that's a photoreceptor for light, so when it's dark, they just park it because they know they can't see what's going on around them, and they're not going to move around and take a chance of running into predators, okay? So they try to go to a place that's safe and they stay put. But with us having light on all the time, they never really, because of the supplemental warmth, they're never really subject to that. So I've given a lot of explanation, but short story is Cornish rock cross meat chickens prioritize ambient temperature. So when it's chilly, they prioritize warmth. When it's too hot for them, they prioritize trying to cool down. They will even stick their head in the shade if they perceive that to be a shaded place, even if the rest of their body is sticking out, and they can get basically overheated sitting in the sun with just their head sticking in the shade where there's not good airflow. So we've seen that happen to birds. So you have to be mindful both ways, but usually with Cornish rock cross meat chickens, the production window being short and them needing warmth when they're young dictates that they want warm temperatures. And so like right now working in here, I'm warm. It's warmer than comfortable in here for me around these heat lamps, but you can see they're comfortable. And so I'd say that to you also as a reference point. If you're working in their space and you're just a little warmer than your ideal comfort zone as a person, your birds are probably happy with that. And you can see they are. That's where the birds are going. So we're definitely leaving heat lamps on today. But they do prioritize food. They do prioritize water. But they will forego food and water to prioritize warmth. So make sure, if you're raising them, no matter what size your flock is, that where they like the ambient temperature, they can also access food and access water in those places too, okay? So as far as between food and water, what do they prioritize more? Most people would by default say, well, they obviously must prioritize food more because Cornish rock cross meat chickens are notorious for being heavy eaters, heavy feeders, getting frenzied if they can't get to food, and wanting to be able to eat all the time. I will counter that though with, I think they prioritize probably water slightly more over food, because here's the thing with Cornish rock cross meat chickens, we haven't let them run out of water, but our estimation is that if they would run out of water, they would probably go off feed, because we've heard of other chicken keepers with their egg chickens talk about times the egg chickens went off of feed, and then come to find out there had been a disruption in the water staying filled up. Like maybe an automatic water failed, or maybe they just didn't get the water buckets filled. And when the water ran out, the chickens went off feed. And I think that might happen with Cornish rock cross meat chickens too, because for one thing, water is required for digestion in chickens. So kind of just as a matter of self-preservation, if the water goes dry, I think they're going to slow down eating. Because if they don't slow down eating, they're not going to be able to digest the food. You're probably going to have a food impaction problem inside the bird. So they prioritize food and water to some extent equally, but certainly they've got to have the water. And if they don't have the water, it's going to negatively impact them. And I would estimate that you would see that happen. If the water went dry, they'd probably go off feed or slack. See those two? See those two about mid-frame, and then they walk away. They kind of run at each other like chicken fight for a few seconds, and then it's over. They walk away. And we start seeing that behavior at about a week old. And we see it in both hens and the young roosters. So we are at a point where we can start to tell hens from roosters at this age, but we get them straight run, and we don't spend a lot of time worrying about who's who, because our processing date is when it is, and they're all going. If they're living, they're leaving. So anyway, but they do prioritize warmth, and they do prioritize food and water, but they will forego food and water in order to be comfortable temperature-wise. And as far as ambient lighting, just be aware the intensity of light does affect birds because of the pineal gland in the skull mainly. All birds have it. Your egg chickens have it. It has an impact on egg production, has an impact on feeding schedules, has an impact on flock habits and flock routines. And birds do a lot of things as a flock and kind of on a circadian rhythm. So, be aware of that. If you even have low lighting and you make it more intense, that's going to stimulate the birds. They'll go and eat. If you have lighting around the clock, they're going to maintain a schedule, and they will incorporate resting into that schedule. If you have 12 hours daylight, 12 hours nighttime, or that approximate pattern, then that's okay. Your birds are just going to eat during the day and not at night. So anyway, that's what they prioritize. I'm going to finish up chores. Actually going to take those 2 trays out, put another big feeder in, top off all the waters, and add 4 more waters back in here. For now, we're going to leave the baby waters. We will adjust to the big bird waters. Some are sitting back there with the red lids. We will be adjusting to those as this week goes on. We'll probably try to put them right down the middle between where the heat lamps are. We want to keep the water central and the feed on the outer edges. We're ready to get into the big bird feeders. We're ready to get into the big bird waters. They are drinking easily 21 to 25 gallon a day. We're seeing that go up, and we have now put in, oh gosh, let me think on feed. We've put in 4.5 bags of feed, so about 225 pounds of feed has been distributed to 124 birds in 15 days. So thanks for joining us. This video rolled a little longer. That does actually help us in our YouTube algorithm in a way that shorter videos don't. But we really appreciate you being here. Put any questions in the comments, and thanks for joining us.